We have Above and Below Haunted, which is basically the Haunted standalone sequel of the game Above and Below. And this is a game where players are going to be competing to build up their own village, both above by building different buildings in their town, but then below as you're going to be building out different caves and caverns. The game does offer multiple ways to score victory points, either through completing adventures for reputation, or building those buildings or caverns, or even collecting and stashing different types of goods, with each new unique good that you find worth even more than the previous. This version of the game is going to be introducing some new adventures and villagers and buildings into the game, but something that is new to this game is that your buildings can actually become haunted, which can lose you reputation and eventually cost you victory points. The nice thing about this is that you can take an action to banish them, and when you do that, you're going to be banishing them to another player's board, and then they're going to be the ones that have to worry about it. There's also some new cave types in this game that are more dangerous and more difficult to acquire, but they do offer better rewards, including a new resource type that always counts towards your highest scoring good. There's also going to be a couple new tokens added into the game, and if you're able to acquire those, they can be spent to issue yourself more rerolls or to gain additional gold. And I should also mention that this one is my own personal pick of the week because I think both this game and the original look like a ton of fun, but I do like the additions with this new version of the game, especially giving you more options to mitigate your dice rolling. And I really like the way that you're able to build your caverns in this game because your caverns are a little bit more difficult to build than your actual buildings above the ground, because in order to build a cavern, you first have to complete an adventure, and then any completed adventures become a new space where you can build a cavern. I really like how those two actions are tied together like that, and it's really going to give you some incentive to make sure that you're doing those adventures. But if you're not familiar with the original game, this is a game that offers 5 different types of actions that players can take on their turn, and in order to take those actions, players are going to be spending these different worker tokens. Each player does start with 3 of these at the start of the game. They're going to have some different die values on them, as well as potentially some special icons. Whenever you actually spend one of these workers in order to perform one of those actions, they are going to get exhausted and put into the exhausted portion of your player board, and the only way that you can get them back is by allowing them to rest. The way this works is at the end of each round, you'll be able to return as many of these tokens equal to the amount of beds that you have in the buildings that you've built. Luckily, each player does start the game with just 1 free building already built, and that particular building does have 3 beds on it. But like I mentioned, each player is going to have one of these player boards, and there's the 5 different actions that you can perform, and you're going to be spending your character tokens in order to do those. The build action here allows you to buy one of the buildings from the shared display and then put it into your own personal display, gaining access to the benefits of that building. But in order to take that action, you do need to spend a worker that has one of these hammer icons on them. Some of these buildings can grant you different types of resources, which, like I said, will gain you victory points at the end of the game. And the way that you actually get those from your buildings is by performing the harvest action. You'll be able to put those resources on the track on the bottom of your board, starting from left to right with each unique resource that you find. And you're going to be stacking like resources and gaining the victory points for each of those. But of course, getting more of your later resources are the ones that will score you the most victory points. The recruit action allows players to gain another worker from the supply, but in order to take that action, you do need to have one of these workers with a quill on them. But the final action we have here is to draw an adventure card. In order to do this, it does require a minimum of 2 workers, but you can use any workers that you want. When you do that, you're going to be drawing one of these encounter cards, which is going to guide you to a section in the encounter book that you're going to have another player at the table read to you. This is going to present a few different options that they can choose to perform, with each of those coming with their own rewards, and also requiring a certain number of successes that you're going to be trying to get through dice rolling. Of course, spending more of your workers on this action does increase your chance of success, because for each of the workers that you use for that action, you're going to be able to roll 1 additional die. Each of these characters could also grant you with multiple successes depending on the character and depending on your dice roll, because you're going to be looking at the dice values in the top right corner of that character token, and if you're able to roll equal or higher than that value, then you're going to be getting the number of successes below it. For example, with this character on the right here, if you roll a 4 or higher, that's going to be granting you with 2 successes, whereas if you roll a 1 or higher, you're going to be getting 1 success. So this character at least does guarantee you at least 1 success, whereas these 2 on the left here, if you roll a 1, you're going to be getting 0 successes. Failing to get a success with a character does injure them, and they're going to be sent to the injured section of the board. They're going to stay there permanently until you're able to spend a potion in order to get them to move to the exhausted section. But if you are able to complete the quest, you're going to be gaining the rewards of that quest. Then you'll also be able to keep the quest card as well and put it next to your board. And this is going to act as a new location space where you could then build a cavern. Caverns work just like the buildings, but they normally are a little bit more powerful. The game continues like this, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below.